She thought she was saving a stray dog. She had no idea she was about to become the most important stranger and the most dangerous man in Chicago's life. The temperature on the south side had dropped to 11 degrees that Tuesday night in February, the kind of cold that turned breath to smoke and made your teeth ache inside your skull. Mara Hensley had been on her feet since 6 in the morning. 16 hours of double shifts at the Rusty Spoon, a cash-only breakfast diner on 63rd and Halsted, where the coffee was burnt and the tips were insulting. And the manager, Roy, had a habit of skimming the tip pool every other Friday. Her nurse's clogs, purchased secondhand, one size too big, stuffed with foam inserts she'd cut from a pool noodle, made a flat, exhausted slap against the wet sidewalk with every step. She had $43 in her apron pocket. Rent on her studio apartment above a laundromat on South Woodlawn was 5 days overdue. Her phone had been on 4% battery since noon. She was not thinking about romance, or fate, or destiny, or any of the words that get stitched onto throw pillows and sold at Home Goods. She was thinking about whether she had enough peanut butter left to constitute a dinner. That was when she heard it. Not crying, not shouting. Something smaller, and in a way, far worse. A sound like wet paper tearing. A rattling, labored wheeze coming from the narrow alley between a shuttered currency exchange and a boarded-up dry cleaner on 67th Street. Mara stopped. Any rational woman walking alone at 11:30 at night in that neighborhood should have kept moving. She knew that. She'd grown up 14 blocks east. She understood the unspoken city grammar. Head down, earbuds in, pretend you are somewhere else entirely. But the sound came again, and this time there was a word threaded through it. A single fractured syllable. Help. She turned into the alley. Wedged between a dumpster and the brick wall, nearly invisible in the dark, was a boy. He looked about 7 years old, maybe 8. He was wearing a wool peacoat that cost more than Mara's monthly rent. Charcoal gray, double-breasted, with engraved silver buttons. His small shoes were Italian leather, but the coat was soaked through, one sleeve torn at the shoulder, and the boy's lips had gone a color that Mara recognized instantly from the 2 semesters of emergency medical training she'd taken before she'd had to drop out of nursing school. A gray-blue, the color of a body losing the fight with cold and something else. His right hand was clutching his side. Dark staining spread beneath his fingers, slow and thick. Oh God, Mara was already on her knees. She yanked off her diner apron and pressed it hard against the wound, the way the training video had shown. Direct pressure, don't lift, don't check, just hold. The boy flinched, a small animal sound escaping him. Hey, look at me. She kept her voice low, steady. She'd learned that from her mother, who'd worked the ER desk at Mercy for 20 years. Calm is contagious, so is panic. Choose carefully. What's your name? Luca, the boy whispered. Luca. Okay, I'm Mara, I've got you. She was already reaching for her phone with her free hand. 4%. She did not let herself think about that. Where are your parents, Luca? Is there someone I should call? The boy moved his other hand, his left hand, and she saw it then. A slim card folded into the breast pocket of that impossibly expensive coat. He pressed it against her palm with the last energy he seemed to have. His eyes slid closed. No. Luca, stay with me. Can you hear me? He made a sound that might have been yes. Mara unfolded the card with one hand, her other still jammed against the wound. In the faint orange glow of the street lamp at the alley entrance, she could make out 2 things, a 10-digit number, handwritten in dark ink, and above it, one line in neat, precise block letters, for emergencies only. Call Roman. She called 911 first. She gave them the cross streets, described the injury, stayed on with the dispatcher until she heard sirens spinning up somewhere in the middle distance. Only then did she dial the second number. It rang once. This better be important. The voice on the other end was low and unhurried, the voice of a man accustomed to being the one who decided what was important and what wasn't. A voice built from authority the way stone is built from pressure, slow, absolute, immovable. Are you Roman? Mara asked. A pause. 1 second. 2. Who is this? My name is Mara Hensley. I found a boy in an alley on 67th and Loomis. He says his name is Luca. He's been stabbed. I think it's a side wound, maybe 4 inches. It's deep, I have pressure on it. But he's lost blood and Her voice cracked once, just once. He's really cold and he's drifting. An ambulance is coming. I don't know how long. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 4 seconds. What hospital? Not a question. An order issued to the universe. Probably Rush. It's the closest trauma center. I'll be there in 8 minutes. If you move him before I get there, I will know. Do you understand me? I'm not going to move him, I'm trying to keep him alive. The line went dead. Mara stared at the phone. 0%. It went black in her hand. Okay, she said to no one in particular, pressing both palms down against the wound where one had been, leaning her body weight into it. Okay, help is coming, Luca, from more than one direction apparently. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. The paramedics had to ease Mara out of the way, gently but firmly, and she realized only when she stood up that her knees were soaked through with ice-cold water, and her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't straighten her fingers. She rode with Luca in the ambulance because no one told her she couldn't, and because the paramedic in the back had looked at her compression job and said, "Good work." And in 11 years of being told she was doing things wrong by bosses and landlords and ex-boyfriends, those 2 words hit her with a force she was completely unprepared for. At Rush University Medical Center, the trauma team took Luca through the double doors, and Mara was left standing in the waiting area in her stained uniform shirt, her ruined apron gone into some biohazard bin, her dead phone in her pocket, and her feet in wet shoes and absolutely no idea what she had just walked into. She found out 8 minutes later. The waiting room didn't go quiet when he came in. It stopped. There is a difference. Quiet is gradual. This was instantaneous, the way sound is erased by a pressure change before a lightning strike. Roman Varro walked through the automatic doors of Rush University Medical Center, like the building had been waiting for him to arrive before it could begin its real purpose. He was tall, 6'3", maybe 6'4", with dark hair pushed back from his face and the kind of jaw that looked like it had been designed by someone who took their work seriously. He wore a charcoal overcoat, no tie, the collar of a black dress shirt open at the throat. He was 40 years old, maybe 42, with the kind of face that had been through something and had come out harder for it, not softer. Behind him, 5 men, dark coats, earpieces, eyes that moved like weapons. The nurses at the triage desk went very still. Roman scanned the room in one long sweep and landed on the only woman who looked like she'd been dragged through a February alley by the collar. Which was fair, because she had. He crossed the waiting room in 12 steps. "You're Mara Hensley." She looked up at him. She was sitting in a plastic chair with her elbows on her knees, her dark hair loose from its bun, a bruise-colored shadow under each eye. She was 26 years old, and she looked like someone who had been tired for a very long time. "You must be Roman," she said. "How did you find him?" "I heard him. I was walking home." She held his gaze. She did not flinch, which he noticed. He noticed it the way you notice something that doesn't follow the expected pattern. He was behind the dumpster between the currency exchange and the old dry cleaner on 67th. He had your card in his coat pocket. Something moved through Roman Varro's face, something brief and terrible and then gone, smoothed back beneath the surface. "What was his color when you found him?" She understood the question. Gray-blue at the lips. Skin was cold. Pulse was there but thin. He'd lost maybe a liter, I think. "I kept direct pressure on it. The paramedic said it helped." Roman studied her. "You have medical training. I had 2 semesters of nursing school. I had to stop." She didn't offer more than that, and he didn't ask. Not then. He told me his name was Luca. "He's yours?" "He is my brother," Roman said, and his voice was so precisely controlled when he said it that Mara could feel the effort that control was costing him. "He is 8 years old. He was supposed to be at home." A muscle jumped at the corner of his jaw. He was not at home. Before she could answer, the trauma bay doors pushed open, and a surgeon in scrubs walked out, pulling down her mask. She stopped when she absorbed the scene in front of her. Then she squared her shoulders, the way people do when they've decided the thing they are walking toward is unavoidable. "Are you family of Luca Varro?" Roman stepped forward. "I am. He's stable," the surgeon said, and Mara heard him exhale once, a single, barely audible release, before the stillness closed back over him. "The wound missed the kidney by about a centimeter. He needed a transfusion and will want to monitor him overnight, but the prognosis is good, Mr. Varro." The compression applied at the scene almost certainly prevented a critical bleed-out. She looked briefly at Mara. Was that you? Yes, Mara said. You may have saved his life. She looked back at Roman. He's asking for you, and he's asking for the lady who held his hand in the ambulance. Roman turned back to Mara. She was already standing, reaching for her coat. I should go. I'm glad he's okay. I have to work at 6. You are not going anywhere, Roman said. Quiet. Absolute. Mara blinked. I'm sorry? Someone put a knife in my 8-year-old brother 2 blocks from my most fortified property in this city. Roman's voice had dropped to something below conversational, something that bypassed the ear and registered directly in the chest. That means someone either had eyes on Luca for long enough to intercept his route, or that the breach came from inside. Either way, you are now a person who has been seen with him. You have been photographed by every camera on that block entering that alley and leaving it with my brother. Within the next 12 hours, whoever did this will have reviewed that footage. Mara stared at him. They don't know if you took something from him. They don't know what he told you. They don't know who you are. Yet, he reached inside his coat and withdrew his phone, extending it toward one of his men without looking away from her. In my world, an unknown variable is a loose end, and loose ends get cut. I'm a waitress, Mara said, and she hated the way her voice came out, steadier than she felt, which was the only small mercy. I make $7.50 an hour plus tips, minus what Roy takes off the top, which I can't prove, but I know. I have $43. I do not have anything anyone would want. You have your life, Roman said, and right now, that is the only thing I cannot afford to let someone else take. He held her gaze for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness, exactly. Something more like recognition. The look of a man who was accustomed to finding everything around him predictable, encountering something he had not predicted. I am not asking, he said. I am telling you. You are coming with me. You are not in danger from me. But you are in danger, and I am the only thing in this city qualified to stand between you and it. Mara Hensley looked at this man, this massive, immovable, terrifying stranger in a coat that cost more than her car would have. If she'd had a car, and she thought about her apartment with the broken radiator and the thin walls and the stack of past due notices rubber-banded on her counter. She thought about Luca's hand in hers on the gurney, small and cold and trusting. She picked up her bag. I need to call my work, she said. My phone is dead. Roman extended his own phone to her without a word. She called Roy. Roy told her if she didn't show up at 6, she was fired. She handed the phone back to Roman, and Roman looked at the screen and then at her, and said, simply, you'll have a different job by morning. She decided not to argue about that right now. The convoy of black SUVs that moved through the streets of Chicago's near North Side at midnight moved the way ice moves, inevitable, unrushed, totally without apology. Mara sat in the back seat of the lead vehicle between Roman and a tinted window, watching the city dissolve past her. The leather seat was heated. She hadn't been in a heated seat since her college roommate's mother had picked them up from the airport over 4 years ago. She was deeply ashamed of how much she appreciated it. They didn't speak for the first 15 minutes. Roman was on his phone, conducting 3 simultaneous conversations in a voice so low she could only catch fragments. Lock the Dearborn house. Pull the footage from 67th going back 48 hours. I want Greco on a plane tonight. His right hand rested on his thigh, the knuckles slightly white where he gripped his phone, and that small betrayal of tension was the only visible evidence that the man sitting beside her was the older brother of a boy who had just nearly bled out on a frozen sidewalk. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something changed. What? He listened, his jaw tightened. Say that again. He listened for another 15 seconds. Then he lowered the phone and looked at Mara with an expression she could not read. What? She said. My men went to retrieve some things from your apartment. He paused. The door had been kicked in. The place had been searched, very thoroughly. They were gone before my men arrived, but the neighbor across the hall heard 2 men on your floor approximately 40 minutes ago. Mara stopped breathing. Her apartment, the place with the water-stained ceiling, and the window that didn't fully close, and the radiator that clanged like a protest at 2 in the morning. The only place that was hers. If you had taken the 63rd Street bus home tonight, Roman said carefully, you would have walked in while they were still there. The SUV moved through a red light without slowing. No one said anything. They think Luca gave you something, Roman continued. Or that you took something from him. There is a flash drive. It went missing from my office 3 days ago. It contains documentation that a specific person would not want disclosed. He paused. They sent someone after an 8-year-old child to find it. When that failed, they followed the thread back to you. I don't have a flash drive, Mara said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't have anything. I know, Roman said. He reached across the space between them, and with a gesture so brief and precise it was almost surgical, he pressed 2 fingers briefly against the back of her hand. Not a hold, just contact. The touch of a man acknowledging that something real was happening to her, without having the vocabulary for comfort. That is why you are with me, because the people who did this do not know that yet, and I intend to use the time while they figure it out. The Varro residence was not a house. It was a decision, a 1920s limestone mansion in Lincoln Park that had been retrofitted with the kind of security infrastructure that was not listed in any architectural catalog. The front gates opened without a visible operator. Floodlights on motion sensors bathed the circular drive in pale white light. Men in dark clothing stood at fixed intervals, not pacing, not shifting, simply present like load-bearing columns that happened to breathe. Inside, it was the opposite of what Mara expected. She had anticipated cold glamour. What she found was warmth, amber lamplight, bookshelves that reached the ceiling, a Persian rug in the front hall, worn thin at the center from decades of foot traffic, framed photographs of 2 boys, one older, one younger, both grinning at something off-camera, at various ages, a basketball wedged behind a console table, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle of the Chicago skyline on the coffee table in the sitting room. A housekeeper named Constance appeared and told Mara, told, not asked, that she would be in the second-floor guest room, and that there were clothes laid out and a shower ready, and that dinner was on the stove and non-negotiable. Mara opened her mouth, and Constance put up one hand. You are in shock, Constance said, not unkindly. Shock requires warmth, food, and a shower, in that order. Mr. Varro will deal with everything else. Your job right now is to be a person, Mara laughed. It came out wrong, too high and too sudden, but Constance just nodded, like this was a normal reaction, and steered her toward the staircase. The guest room was the size of Mara's apartment, minus the mold. She stood in the shower for 12 minutes with the water as hot as she could stand it, and tried to process the last 4 hours of her life. The trying did not go well. She put on the clothes left for her, soft gray sweatpants, a white thermal shirt, thick socks, and sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. Below her, she could hear the low percussion of men moving through the house with purpose. Doors, footsteps. Voices just below the threshold of comprehension. She did not sleep. 3 days passed. They were the strangest 3 days of Mara Hensley's life. And she had once been briefly detained at O'Hare, because her middle name matched a name on a minor customs watch list. She was not allowed to leave the second floor without an escort, but her every need was met with a promptness and thoroughness that felt deeply surreal. Hot meals appeared, books appeared, a phone charger appeared, a new phone appeared. Constance checked on her twice a day with the efficiency of a nurse and the warmth of a woman who had seen a lot and judged very little. Roman came to see her once each evening, always brief, always standing in the doorway rather than entering, as if the room were hers and he was a guest. He told her what he could, that his security team was working through the footage, that the flash drive remained unaccounted for, that Luca was recovering and asking about her. On the second evening, she asked, Do you know yet who did it? I have a theory, he said. I need one more piece. On the third morning, Luca came to find her. Mara heard the knock at her door, timid, 3 small raps, and opened it to find Luca Varro standing in the hallway in Spider-Man pajamas, his left side wrapped in bandaging visible beneath the open fabric, a stuffed German shepherd tucked under his right arm. Behind him, at a respectful and slightly absurd distance, stood 2 enormous men in suits who were clearly not accustomed to escorting 8-year-olds in pajamas and were doing their best. Hi, Luca said. I wanted to see if you were okay. Roman said you had a hard night. Mara's throat did something inconvenient. She crouched down to his level. I'm okay. How are you feeling? It hurts when I breathe too big, he said, with the frank practicality of a child. But the doctor said that's normal. She said you did the right thing in the alley. He looked at her very seriously. Roman doesn't say thank you. He says it's because he doesn't know how. Constance says it's because nobody ever taught him. But I know he's grateful, because he checked on you 4 times last night. He stage whispered this last part with the conspiratorial gravity of a child sharing classified information. Mara bit the inside of her cheek. Is that so? He tries to be quiet, but the floorboards on this floor are loud. Luca held out the stuffed dog. This is Sergeant. He's good if you're scared at night. You can borrow him. There are moments in a life that do not announce themselves as significant while they are happening. This was one of them. Mara took the stuffed dog with both hands, carefully, the way you take something being offered that is genuinely precious to the person offering it. Thank you, Luca, she said. She was still holding Sergeant when it happened. Luca had been telling her about the jigsaw puzzle downstairs. Apparently it was a project he and Roman had been working on since December, and they were stuck on the skyline portion because the blue pieces all look the same, and something he said made her vision snag. Mr. Hargrove said it was fine, that he was a consultant for Roman's company, but Roman never has consultants come to the house, so I thought it was weird. Wait. Mara sat up straighter. Who is Mr. Hargrove? Luca tilted his head. Roman's chief operations officer. He runs the property management side. He was at the house last week. A pause. He smelled like chemicals, kind of sharp, like a swimming pool but not. Mara went very still. She had smelled that smell in the alley. Under the cold and the blood and the city grime, there had been something sharp and synthetic clinging to the air around the wound. She had catalogued it automatically, the way people who waitress for years catalog details. Table 4 needs a refill. Table 7's check is wrong. The man in the booth by the window is not going to tip. She had filed it and forgotten it under the weight of everything else. And 3 days ago, when she had been too shaken to do more than sit and eat the bowl of soup Constance put in front of her, she had glanced at the stack of mail on the kitchen island and seen a business card that had slipped from Roman's coat. Philip Hargrove, Chief Operations Officer, Varro Property Group, a man who had unrestricted access to the house, who would know Luca's schedule, who had the professional relationships and financial motive to want documentation of fraud kept buried. The call was coming from inside the building, and not a small one. She stood up. Luca, I need you to go back to your room, right now. Lock the door. Only open it for Roman or Constance. Can you do that? Luca looked at her face and stopped being 8 years old for a moment. Children who grow up in complicated households develop a specific instinct, the ability to read the air in a room and know when an adult's urgency is the real kind. He nodded once, tucked Sergeant under his arm, and walked quickly back down the hall. One of the suited guards followed him. The other fell into step behind Mara as she went down the stairs faster than was strictly graceful. She could hear voices in the study. She pushed the door open. Roman was standing at the window, seated at the desk with a tablet and an expression of mild professional concern, was a silver-haired man in his mid-50s in an impeccable gray suit. 2 of Roman's men stood near the fireplace. The rooms smelled faintly of coffee and wood smoke, and something sharp and synthetic that hit Mara's nose like a needle. Mara. Roman turned, his eyes moving over her face with an immediacy that made her think Luca was right about the floorboards. What's happened? She pointed at Hargrove. It's him, she said. Her voice was steady. She was somewhat surprised by that. Luca told me a man named Hargrove was at the house last week, presenting himself as a consultant. He noticed the smell, described it as a pool chemical, chlorine adjacent. She didn't look away from Hargrove. I smelled the same thing in the alley. On Luca's coat, around the wound. I didn't place it until now because I was dealing with a child who was bleeding. She took a breath. 3 days ago, I saw your business card on the island, Mr. Hargrove. You had access to Luca's schedule. You knew what was on that flash drive because you're the one who took it from this office to cover the asset transfers in the Pilsen development project. She said it the way she said wrong orders back to cooks. Calmly, clearly, without hedging. You had someone put a knife in an 8-year-old boy. The room went silent, the way rooms only go silent when the largest person in them has stopped breathing. Philip Hargrove looked at her with the specific contempt of a man who has spent his entire career being underestimated by women and had never once updated his model. "Mr. Varro," he said, "I understand she's been through a great deal, but I have to say, don't." Roman's voice was quiet. It was the quietest it had been since she'd met him. It was the most frightening. He didn't move from the window. He didn't need to. The Pilsen transfers, the ghost accounts, the shell company registered in Delaware under your brother-in-law's address. A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be devastating. "Mara, how did you know about the Pilsen project?" "I didn't," she said. "I guessed." He just confirmed it. Roman looked at Hargrove. Hargrove had gone the color of old paper. "Edmund," Roman said to one of the men by the fireplace, "the footage from last week's property tour, pull it. I want the vehicle that Mr. Hargrove arrived in, and I want every person who was in it." He picked up his phone from the desk with the precision of someone who had already decided every next step and was simply executing them in order. "And call our friends downtown. Tell them I have documentation of wire fraud, conspiracy, and criminal assault ready for their review. Tell them to send someone who is not personally acquainted with Mr. Hargrove's brother-in-law." Hargrove stood up. He moved toward the door. He made it 2 steps. He did not make it 3. Mara did not watch what happened next. She looked at the window instead, at the thin February light coming through the glass, the pale gray of the city in winter, the bare branches of the elms in the front yard. She had grown up 14 blocks from here. She had walked past this house 1,000 times without ever imagining she would be standing inside it, in borrowed sweatpants, holding a stuffed German shepherd, having just dismantled someone's 15-year career with a chemical smell and a lucky guess. She heard the door. Then the house went quiet again. Roman came to stand beside her at the window. For a while, neither of them said anything. Outside, a black SUV pulled through the gates and then away. The elms did not move. "Luca was right," Roman said finally. "About the puzzle? About you." He looked at her. Not the way he'd looked at her in the hospital, measuring risk. Not the way he'd looked at her in the car, calculating liability. He looked at her the way you look at something that has surprised you thoroughly enough that you are going to have to revise your understanding of how surprises work. He said the lady who held his hand was different. Different how? He said you talked to him like he was a real person. Roman's voice was very even. "Not everyone does." Mara looked down at Sargent. "He is a real person." "Yes," Roman said, "he is." Another silence. It was not uncomfortable, which was somehow the most disorienting thing that had happened to Mara in a very eventful 72 hours. "Your apartment is gone," Roman said. "Hargrove's men weren't careful. The super is already talking to contractors. Even if they rebuild it, it won't be ready for weeks." He turned to the desk, pulled out a plain envelope, and held it out to her. "Inside is a key. There is a furnished apartment on Dearborn Street, 3 blocks from here. It is in the name of a property trust that cannot be connected to me by anyone currently in law enforcement. Your first 3 months are covered. After that, it is yours. The lease, the utilities, the security system. I have also spoken with someone at Northwestern Memorial. There is an open position in their emergency nursing program for candidates with relevant field experience and at least 2 semesters of completed coursework." A pause. "They are expecting your call." Mara stared at him. Then she looked at the envelope, then back at him. "You're giving me a nursing program. I am giving you the application," he said, with the careful precision of a man who had thought about exactly how to phrase this. "What you do with it is yours." She took the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. "Luca also told me," Roman said, "that he promised you the left side of the puzzle, the part with Millennium Park. He seems to feel this constitutes a binding agreement." Mara laughed. "It came out right this time, real and a little ragged and genuinely surprised. He's 8. He's a Varro." Roman almost smiled. It was the ghost of one, the structural suggestion. In this family, a promise made over jigsaw puzzles is legally enforceable. She looked at him. This man who commanded rooms and ended negotiations and walked into hospitals like weather systems, who checked on her 4 times in the night on creaking floorboards and still couldn't say thank you, who loved his little brother with an intensity so complete it had walked right through the locked door of his composure when she'd told him Luca was hurt. "The puzzle," she said. Is it still on the table? It hasn't moved. Then I should probably earn the left side. She had walked into that alley with $43, a dead phone, and no plan beyond making it home. She had no idea what she was walking into now, but she had learned something on 67th Street, in the dark, with her hands pressed hard against an 8-year-old boy's coat, that the things worth doing rarely announce themselves. They just sound like something in the cold asking for help, and some people stop. Mara Hensley stopped. If you want to know what happens next between Mara and Roman, whether the puzzle ever gets finished, whether the left side of Millennium Park is everything Luca promised, hit that like button right now, subscribe to Sadie's Romance Library, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell us in the comments, would you have turned into that alley?